Hey there, wonderful teachers. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about teaching chords right from the beginning of how I teach chords to my students and how we're creating chord progressions at the moment in our online lessons. So if you want to learn more about teaching piano chords to your kiddos in a way that is accessible to them and makes sense for even beginners to learn about chords, then you're going to want to stay tuned in here to the show. So let's get started. All right, everyone, it is awesome to be back with you again, and I would love to hear from you. So if you're watching live right now, please hit me up in the chat. Let me know whereabouts you are. If you're joining me for the first time, let me know about that as well, because I always like to welcome the newbies here as well as my returning regulars. And let me know what you want to learn about chords, teaching chords. It's an interesting topic, it's a big one. This is just going to be detailing one way that I've been teaching chords, and specifically I've been doing this mostly in buddy lesson time. You can absolutely do the same process in solo lessons as well. Hi to Faye and Claire and Alicia, great to have you guys here. So awesome to have you all joining us. We do these chats 3 times a week, so if it is your first time and you're watching now, please do come back again. We would love to see you. So it's Wednesday today. On Friday, we're going to be talking about chords further. So we're going to be taking our chords into Garageband on Friday. So if you've ever been curious about that, about using the Garageband app, I think I'll probably show it on iPad, but I'm happy to dive into the Mac version as well if people want to see the computer version. It does work a little bit differently. The iPad version is great for this particular activity. If you have specific questions today, I want to hear them because I want to make sure this is useful for you. So let me know in the chat. Let me know. Oh, really interesting. Claire said, really scary topic for me as I was never taught these. Yeah, you know what? I wasn't really taught chords either until Roman numeral analysis came up in theory exams. That's when I first encountered chords, and I talked about this on a recent webinar. That's totally crazy. Why would that be the first experience with chords? Roman numeral analysis? Really? That's the first time you've ever formally talked about chords? Sure, I was playing them from written music, but I wasn't really analysing them in any way until full-on analysis. So, for sure, it definitely can be a scary topic, and I hope I can help you with that and give you one approach that is working for me lately. This, as I said, is something that I've been doing in my buddy lesson time, and the project we did before that was our composition project. So if you haven't watched that live stream, you can go back and check it out, but I wanted to show you guys, especially those who did watch that and were curious about their book. This is the final book. It just arrived yesterday. This is the final book that is going to be going out to my students, where we have all of our collaborative compositions. So my students worked on these by passing the compositions along from student to student, and it worked out really, really well. We were delighted with the results, and it was a really fun way to bring everyone together while we're all staying indoors and staying sensible and staying safe and all that good stuff, to connect people with each other in a way that was meaningful. So like I said, I did a whole separate chat about this, so you can go back and check that out. But I wanted to show you guys who have seen it. Laurie said, love it. Thank you, Laurie. I think it turned out really great. So that's what it looks like inside. Just wanted to give you guys a taste of that. And that's the back. I have them all upside down. Decided to go with these monsters. These are originally from a game in VMT. I think that's live. It might be one we haven't released yet. No, we definitely have released it. It's called Fearsome Form, and you see the monsters kind of morph. You can especially see it along here, right? Because they're kind of mixing with each other. So this is probably from the Sonata one, where it's talking about the exposition, etc. Anyway, it's a game on form, and I decided to borrow those little guys for our cover for this one. Now, from there, what we did when we finished that project, that took us about 4 to 6 weeks. And from there, we have moved on to mostly focusing on chords in our buddy lesson time. Hi Birgit, great to have you here from Germany. Always like to give a shout out to those of you over here on this side of the Atlantic with me. Not that it's a competition, but we get a lot of US people watching with their morning coffee, which is awesome. And Canadians, obviously. Hi Diane. Awesome to have you here. And Claire is from Scotland. Great to have you here, Claire. So, yeah, chords. How do we teach them? Well, there's a lot of different approaches, and I take several different approaches in my studio, and I detailed one of them on a recent webinar. Members can check that out in the Academy. That's more of my general approach, but what I'm going to be sharing today is something we've been doing in our online lessons that is loosely based from... Claire, you're funny. You said Scotland. Different Claire. I wasn't mixing you up, Claire. Claire and Claire. Okay. This is loosely based on Tim Topham's 4-chord composing. And now it's not the same as his course, and you should absolutely check that out if you're a member of Top Music Pro, which you may be familiar that I'm involved in. We have a course there about 4-chord composing that Tim created, and that's an awesome approach, and it's great for teens especially, and maybe for adults as well, and younger students who are a bit more advanced. My studio is on the younger side and the more beginner side in general because they are younger. And so I take a more gradual approach in general. And we are doing a form of 4-chord composing, sort of, but a little bit differently. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share it just the way I do with kiddos. I won't make you do any of the naming of the chords because it would be too slow, and anyway I'm pretty sure you can figure out the notes, so I don't need to test your knowledge, but I'm going to talk you through exactly what I would do with students and what we've been doing in our lessons. And for that it's best to use the overhead view. So this is how I do it with the overhead view, and I just use, this is a whiteboard, by the way, shout out to Ultimate Music Theory. This was a gift from the wonderful Glory Saint Germain, and it has a plain back which I use for this with my whiteboard markers. So very low tech option apart from the overhead camera. Obviously that requires a bit of tech. The first thing I do in these lessons... Oh! My keyboard didn't have any power. That wasn't going to work. The first thing I do in these lessons is to get my students in their first lesson with this to play all the chords from the scale of C going up. And even if they don't know a C scale, they can still do this. So they're going to play going up like that. So I just get them to play it like that. This is assuming they're at a sort of beginner to early intermediate level. If they are beyond that and already familiar with chords, then I would skip some of this. But right from the beginning, that is what I would have them do. And if they're not able to play the full chord, I have them play just a skip. So they're just doing skips, going up from C to C. Then the next time, they're going to play the same thing, but say numbers as they go. And I'm demonstrating briefly each of these steps, and then they're doing it on their piano. It's important that they actually action these things so that they get experience with it. So they're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we start skipping 8 after that. If this is making sense and you're following along and you're interested in this approach, make sure to hit the like button, by the way, while you're here. So that's step 1, step 2, all very basic. It only takes a sec, but I prefer to establish that before we get going with writing anything down. From there, what I ask them to do is tell me the notes in the first chord they played. So I'll ask one of them. I'm dealing with buddies, so I'll say, okay, Anna, will you tell me what's in the first note, or what's in the first chord, right? And she says C, E, G, and I say, okay, Barry. I've been using Anna and Barry a lot recently, haven't I? And then Barry names the next one, okay? And we go up through that like that. I'll keep going so we have it all laid out. Okay, so I'm asking each one of them, each one of these. So it does take some time to do that, but it's important that I'm not just writing stuff out and they're saying, oh yeah, I get it. That they're actually participating in it. And there will often be one of my buddies that it is not getting this, is not twigging what we're doing. And I need to get them to go back and play through it again and name the numbers and all of that stuff. So we do that, and then I go back through each of those chords one more time, and I alternate again between them and ask them to tell me if it's major or minor. Now, here's where, if they haven't done major and minors yet, this is where we'll step in and do a bit of ear training on that. But assuming they've encountered that basic concept, we'll go through and they play each chord and they try to tell me whether it's major or minor, just by ear, unless they already know the semitones, and then we can go through them. And if it's major, I put a big purple M at the top, and if it's minor, I put a little pink M. Okay, so I'm going through again. Anna and Barry are naming each of these, hopefully getting them right, but it doesn't matter if they don't. Then we get to the last one, and I say, do either of you know any other type of chord? And maybe they know the word diminished, maybe they don't. But either way, I help them figure out what that is, and we talk about it a little bit, and I often talk about it as being mostly for scary films. I know that's an oversimplification, but it does help them figure things out. Let me know if this is making sense in the comments, or if you have any questions so far. Otherwise, I'll continue. So the diminished chord, then we say, okay, for what we're doing, we're going to write some pop music, so we're probably not going to use this, so we're just going to cross it out. Let's forget about him. Okay. And for the other ones, can you tell me which numbers the ones are that are major? And then I number them. And I do this first in Roman numerals. I find most kids can figure them out since we're only using 1 to 6. But I do ask them, are these going to be confusing? Would you like me to write numbers? A lot of them are up for the challenge and they think Roman numerals are kind of cool, so they want me to stick with that. But if they want me to, I'll write the digits in below there. So I ask them for the major, which major are the numbers? That doesn't make sense. Which numbers are the majors? And they name 1, 4, and 5, and then I ask the other one which numbers are the minors, and we write those in. Okay, and then I talk to them about the special names we have for those. So I tell them that these 3 are called a similar name to the 3 colors that we use to mix other colors. Most kids know the word primary in that context. And here's where I often introduce the word triads. If they're on the younger end, I don't particularly highlight the fact that I'm saying triads now instead of saying chords. But I do just throw it in there so that they get used to that alternate vocabulary. And then I ask them if those are primary, what are the other ones probably called? And it's very handy that here in Ireland we call it primary and secondary school. So it's very easy for them to figure out that the other ones are secondary. If you don't have that frame of reference, the younger ones might not know that word. I don't know. Those of you in the US can tell me whether they find that quite as intuitive as we do over here in Ireland. But yeah, they know that secondary school is what's going to come after they're in primary school, or that's where they went already, if that's where they're at. Okay, now we have it all laid out. I'll explain to them very clearly what we're about to do. And it's good to get their attention before I do this and be very clear that they need to focus, okay? So I tell them that I'm going to write 4 blanks here. So I don't just write these things, I describe exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to write 4 spaces. Okay, this is the 4 chord composing bit that's borrowed from Tim. And then a repeat sign. And then I'm going to put a 1 chord on the end. Okay? And this is something that they're going to learn by doing, okay? So some of my students will have already encountered it, they'll understand what we're doing. Some have no idea what this is about yet, but they'll get it by doing it week after week. And this is a process we're repeating again and again. So we've got 4 spaces, and then we've got a 1 on the end. And I'd like you guys to do this bit. So what I tell my students is simply, and we don't play through this or anything, it's not that type of composing. This is really just randomization and messing around with chords for us. Although you can make more of a composing exercise and tell them to try things out and decide what their favorite is. I prefer to do this randomly. So let me know what I should put in the first one. The only background info I give my students or guidance I give them at this stage is we're going to want to have more or at least equal primary to secondary for it to sound good. That's all I tell them. More primary, less secondary. So you guys in the chat, come up with a chord for me. Tell me the first number. In fact, you can just put in the number that you want and I'll write them down in the order that they come through. That might be fun. It might sound totally terrible, but that's part of this process. So let me know a number in the chat. I don't mind Roman numerals or regular numerals. You can take your pick. The point of this exercise is to get familiar with chords, with creating structures and underlying harmonies, and playing with the chords, which you're about to see in a sec that we play around with them. Okay, we've got a 4. Thank you to Elizabeth. Laurie says 6. Faye says 2. Now we want more. Okay, good. Sorry to Claire Darker, because I skipped yours because we want more primary than secondary. That's our only rule, right? You didn't know that you were adding too much secondary, but it would have resulted in that. So now what I do is I say, okay, this is our new pattern. And I point to it very explicitly and I say, okay, I'm going to play this twice because of the repeat sign. And then I'm going to play a long 1 to finish. What I actually say is, no, I describe the full thing normally. So I say, okay, for each one of these chords, I'm going to play the chord 4 times in my right hand. I'm going to hold the root note in my left hand. For each one of these, then I'm going to repeat it, and then I'm going to play 1 to finish. Okay? And then I play that, and I talk through what I'm doing as I'm playing. So I'm going to start on 4, which is F, 4 times, and then we're doing 6, 2, 5, repeat, 4, 6, 2, 5, long 1 to finish. And at this stage, especially the tweens and teens often say, oh my gosh, that sounds fantastic. Even if we came up with a kind of wonky progression, they think it sounds amazing. Because it sounds like every pop ballad ever. No matter what they wrote. So I play through that, and then I turn to one of my buddies, pick whichever student I have there that's slightly more advanced, and ask them to give it a go first, and then ask the other one to give it a go. Our next step then, if we're ready for it, so for I should have said, if I have 2 younger students or brand new beginners, I will get them just to do the third there. So, but otherwise they're doing the same thing. And I obviously added pedal there, but they don't need to use the pedal if they're not already doing so in other contexts. Yeah, Laurie, I think it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Right. And Janelle, yeah. I think you guys came up with a great random progression, right? This is the magic of this system. It works, some of them sound like nonsense, especially if they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If they go in order, it tends to sound a bit dodgy, but otherwise it'll probably sound like something. Laurie, do I have to start with the major? No. But since I give them that guidance, more primary than secondary, they tend to start with the major. Obviously, it'll make it sound a bit more cohesive if they do start with the major, but that's part of the experimentation. Sometimes they write one that actually it's in a different key. That's what's happened. And then so when it lands on 1 at the end, it doesn't sound like the end. It doesn't sound like a cadence. It sounds like nonsense. because they've written something in a different key. But that's just part of the randomization of this, and that's part of exploring. So the next step we take, if they're ready for it, with a newer student, we would just stick with that, and then the next week we'd repeat the same thing. And when they're starting to pick up on it, we would explore a different key. So what I do there is I just rub this out, and at this stage I actually axe the diminished one. Can't be bothered with him anymore. And we just stick with 1 to 6. Nice and simple. And we go to a new key, and I get them to lay out the notes in that new key. So G, B, D, you get the idea, and we talk about key signatures and lay the whole thing out in that new key and go from there. And then from there on, we might start in that new key. So every one of my lessons, they're at a different sort of stage, and I just know roughly where they're at in terms of how comfortable they were the last week, and so we take it from there. So if they were doing great with several keys last week, I might say, okay, today we're just going to start in A major. Play an A major scale. What's the key signature? Okay, let's map out those chords. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys watching. Let me know if you need any clarification there. But basically it's just about starting in a key that they're going to be reasonably comfortable in and going from there. One further extension is to have them alter the rhythm. So I'll ask one of them to come up with a note value. Let's say they say T, okay? And then the next student says Ta, and then I tell them probably that we need another T. It depends on their level. And then the next student says tattoo, or quaver, crotchet, quaver, minim, whatever way you want to verbalize that. So now we've got cinco, pata, two, or tita, tita, two, or one and, oh, that's my marker. You get the idea. So then they need to play that pattern now on each one, and this is where it starts to really sound interesting. So they're going to do the same pattern, but right, with their new syncopated rhythm, which is fun, or whatever rhythm they came up with. Two more extensions that we do when we're experimenting with this. In particular, I use these when a student or a pair of students needs to get more comfortable with the key that we're in, and they're not ready to move on, but we need to spend more time in this key. And so when that happens, two more extensions that I do from there are that I start swapping out one of these for rests, because I always like an opportunity to work on them playing rests properly, and eventually we're left with almost nothing in the bar and they need to count really carefully. And then another thing I get them to do is, okay, I say to Anna, pick one of these to swap out for a different number, and Anna says, I want to change that 2 to a 1, right? And then Barry gets to change one as well. I want to change the 6 to a 2. Barry wants his 2 back in, right? So then it's a whole new progression, and we practice with that, and we keep altering the rhythm and keep altering the chords until they're really comfortable with that key. And as I said, we repeat it several weeks in a row. So that's the basic concept. Let me check in with the chat here. Janelle, I didn't really say that. No, not necessarily. She said with these students have been playing major scales yet. Most of them might have played the C scale, but they wouldn't necessarily have played all of them. As I said, I'm doing this with a lot of buddy students, and so often one of them has and one of them hasn't, because they're at different levels. And so if that's the case, I'll just ask the one who has to answer those questions and to fill the other student in, right? So, Emma, you can tell us, because you already know the G major scale, what sharp does it have in it, blah, 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 and take it from there. Laurie, do you teach all of the scales before your method book introduces them? I think it is great. It takes too long otherwise. I'm not sure if you mean that it takes too long to teach scales or it takes too long to do the chords without knowing the scales. if it's the latter, I don't think it does. It really doesn't take that much longer for students who don't know scales because of the way we're just stepping through them. And, all you need is, if we're mapping it out on the board like that, they're really just stepping each letter. And then I can tell them where the sharps go if I need to. But normally one of them knows and they can help the other one out, since I do have the buddy students together. To answer your first question though, Laurie, yes, absolutely. I am a big advocate of starting scales way sooner than most method books introduce them. Depends on the method book, but I haven't encountered one who does them early enough for my liking. Not too soon, they need to be playing legato before I will introduce scales, but I certainly will get to them before most method books, and even more so than that, I will get to more of them much, much faster. Because I don't want my students to be scared of the key of G flat. It's a perfectly easy key to play in. There's nothing difficult about it. B flat, that's challenging. You know what I mean? Like, you can have students delay scales so much that they think all black key things are hard. And that's just not true. And it's not helpful for reading or for playing, most importantly. Too long to learn all the scales. Too long to wait if they have to learn all the scales. Is that what you mean, Laurie? Yeah, if so, for sure. Okay, so that's the basic concept. What we're going to be going through on Friday is how we're taking this through into Garageband, as I said. So that's going to be a really fun one. It's going to be based on the app on the iPad. So if you have an iPad, it's already pre-installed. If you've never used it, Garageband is awesome. It is so fun to play around with. And they get to take their favourite progression, and this is something we'll be doing in the last few weeks of term here. I only have 3 weeks after this. 3 weeks left. I know some of you are already finished, so you're like, whoa, you still have 3 weeks left. 3 weeks left. I can't believe it. I can't believe how much this year has flown, especially this last crazy pandemic semester. Has just flown by. I can't believe how many weeks I've been teaching online. It's incredible. But yeah, they're going to be inputting these. So we've been doing this already for a few weeks. We're going to be inputting them into Garageband, these chord progressions, and they'll be choosing the guitar we use or adding drums, that kind of thing. And it's going to be really fun. We've done this exploration with a few students already, and I have a plan for how we're implementing it. So I hope you'll join me on Friday for that. The schedule for these, by the way, is this: Mondays at 2, Wednesdays at 3, Fridays at 2. That is in my time zone, Dublin time. So it's roughly the time you're watching right now, or an hour earlier, on Mondays and Fridays. And yeah, it's going to be a fun one on Friday. I hope you'll join me there. The other tradition we have on a Friday is that you guys get to suggest what we're going to talk about the next week. So I'm open to suggestions. I want to hear what you want to learn about, and I hope that you'll come along to make some suggestions. Before you leave today, please do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, because all of this stuff lets YouTube know that you find this content valuable, that you want to see it, and that others might find it valuable too. And we want to encourage more teachers to be teaching with chords, to be doing all of that fun stuff. And speaking of encouraging teachers, if you're not a member and you want access to great resources that will help you with online teaching and in-person teaching, you can go to vibrantmusicteaching.com right now and enter the coupon code ONLINE, just all one word, ONLINE, to get a 1-week trial for $1. Some final questions before I let you guys go. Joy, is this book on my website? No, this is for my students. They created this. This is a special present that I give to my students every year, which is a book, a collection of their compositions that they've been doing in the studio. So we're not selling it. I don't sell their copyrighted work, although it would be challenging with the collective copyright for sure. But yeah, that's purely a gift for my students. And there's more about that in my last Friday's broadcast, if you're interested in that. Thank you all so much for joining me. It has been wonderful to hang out with you again. I hope I'll see you back here on Friday where we're talking about Garageband, and back here next week for more fun teaching explorations and inspirations and ideas and chats. I'll see you then, guys. Bye for now.